Originally, the U.S. wanted to push for an overthrow of Assad, and then they just kind of backed off and armed one of the rebel groups that's in there that wants to overthrow Assad. And now it seems like they're just going to passively watch it and try to just go after the Islamic State. Should the U.S. actively push to to support the groups that want to overthrow Assad, or should we do what Russia's basically doing and make sure he stays the hell in there?
I'm trying to think on this one because I mean both stances have logical arguments to them. I think if we look at history, it's been a disaster so far every time we have supported the regime. When we put the right ones in place, well, what we call right, they either collapse or devolve into something worse. But then the same argument, if we leave it to its own devices, then sometimes we have crazy other states rise up, like ISIS or dictators, which then it almost seems like causes this endless cycle where we have to intervene and back off. To be honest, Igor, I can't give you an honest answer on how we can solve the issue of these dictators. I don't think there is one. I think everybody's tries to play it off like they have the magic answer to the bullshit.
Josh, what do you think our role specifically in Syria right now should be as it refers to Assad?
With Assad, it is an awful question, and I definitely think that since Putin has declared himself Team Assad, I think again, yeah, we're kind of now we have to be like, all right, well, I guess he's got to be gone. And to be fair, President Obama, back when they were first talking about it, and with Assad using chemical weapons. It was surprising that they're like, we're certain he's used chemical weapons, and no one in the world cared, to include the United States. And so I think that it sends a very strange message, especially considering that the Iraq War was precipitated on the threat of mass. Here you have a dictator who uses them, and somehow we're not sure he should go. And I think I think part of the problem is one thing, and I never thought that I would utter these words in my life, but Rick Santorum, sense yesterday, when he was sort of talking about looking at the radical Islamist problem from a theocratic standpoint and sort of like what their goals are. And essentially what I think that does is it scratches the surface of understanding your enemy, and that's what we need to do. We need to know that, correct me if I'm wrong, Peter, if this wasn't your experience, but, we think that by setting up a good government, that'll fix the problem. But the Iraqi culture that I experienced, they expect the authorities and the government to be corrupt, and they expect it to let them down. And there's sort of a trade-off there. Like, they're willing to bribe people as long as the stuff gets done. In fact, it's almost required. So I think that, the cultural differences sort of preclude a way for people on the outside of that culture to even come up with a strategy. We need to have educated expatriates from those different countries, moderates from within the country, willing to come to some kind of coalition like the one Saudi Arabia announced that is more Muslim-oriented. Because I think the reason we're at this junction right here, like Peter mentioned and we've talked about, is that since World War II, people who haven't lived there have tried to dictate how these people live. And that hasn't worked. We need something new.
Well, Peter, that's a great point. On the one hand, it obviously affects our security. On the other hand, anytime we meddle in other people's business, it always backfires on us.
So, yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about security, please tell me exactly what we've gotten out of that through our actions over the last 14 years. Because clearly the majority of American people don't think we're more secure or more safe. So that's kind of a big question right there. The underlying question, and every time I watch CNN, the hairs on the back of my head just stand up in righteous anger when I keep hearing we? What should we do about it? Well, why do we have to do anything about it? Why is who's in charge of a pissant country like Syria? Why does that matter to the United States? Or pick another one, or any of them. I mean, why is this an American issue at all? It used to be, in theory, all about oil. We have to have all the oil from the Middle East. You don't hear that much anymore, but there's still that. And that is just silliness. The oil has to go somewhere. They can't eat it. They've got to sell it somewhere, and they'll be happy to sell it to whomever wants it. The Iranians, for years, would have loved to sell us their oil. And the oil was always going to keep flowing out of the Middle East when they needed to make money. That's all they've got to buy or sell. And so it doesn't really matter who's in charge of these governments. I don't know that we can point to too many governments in the Middle East that aren't some form of dictatorship. I mean, we dress it up with a pretty word like monarchy. But this is not our issue. America has to sort of decide what truly does matter for our security. And I think the answer is a whole hell of a lot less than we pretend is our problem to solve. Climate change, we might want to do something about that. That's a global problem. Facilitating greater trade among nations, that seems like a good one. Making sure that nuclear power plants are safe so that Japanese radiation clouds don't keep flying over Seattle. That seems like something worth doing for our safety and security. Never mind clearing up the problems here at home, though obviously we're talking about foreign policy here. Who cares who's in charge of Syria vis-a-vis America's broader national security?